Welcome to Secular Soup. Stay tuned for real talk about atheism, feminism, politics, parenting, and whatever the fuck else Amy and Amy want to talk about, because this is their show. And get ready for a whole lot of motherfucking profanity.
You want to hear a secret?
I won't tell anybody. Go ahead. If I sit next to you, I'm going to get gonorrhea. It's going to jump into me. Just two ladies hanging out.
Is it okay for me to make fun of his neck waddle if I make fun of my own neck waddle?
I'm not sure.
That's a real ethical conundrum.
Would you know if you were born a lizard person, or can you be like adopted into the...
I think you know.
We're such professionals.
We really are.
Buckle up, bitches. It's time to have some soup.
I am Amy with a Y, who, if anybody's listening, you should know that by now. I'm also very unprepared in trying to plug in my laptop to the right connection so that it doesn't die. And I'm a really bad podcaster. You guys probably didn't know that about me, but we're not professional at all. So we're doing our second interview, giving our platform to some different voices that aren't Amy and I being super, super white talking all the time. So I've got Mandisa Thomas here, who everybody knows from Black Nonbelievers, returning champ. Say hi, Mandisa.
Hello, everyone. Just in case there's anyone out there who isn't familiar with me.
Yeah, they all know you. Trust me. We have a very small listener base. And Tiffany Harding, are you still on Angry Black Rant? Are you?
It's been a while because the host passed away. Yeah.
Yep.
And Ishmael passed away, and we miss him. And I haven't done a show in a while, but I'm a stand-up comedian in the DC area, and I have also done some podcasts from here. You know, I'm shaking my beggar's cup, finding whichever podcast will take me in. Until
I love it.
I get off my ass and start my own, I suppose.
You know, you really should. Like, starting a podcast, honestly, I'm surprised Amy and I are still doing it because I thought we'd lose interest in about a week. But shockingly, it's nice to have someone else to do it with, though, because then you're kind of forced to, like, then the other person's saying, come on, we need to record. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
so we
awesome.
wanted... Yeah, go ahead. Well, and I was going to say, they're just, especially in the atheist world, there are not enough Black podcasts that are directed at atheists. And I really liked Angry Black Rant for that reason, because it was one of the few that there was where, you know, we could listen to it and it was a different perspective. And I personally learned a lot just from listening to Ishmael talk about experiences he had and how different that was from anything I ever knew. And I think that a lot of us, meaning white people, are in that kind of same boat where we've lived in this just secluded world for so long and not even realized what we don't know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I want to basically, how about you each tell us just a little bit about yourself, your background, you know, your backstory. Do you want to start, Mandisa?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
You know, for those of you who, who aren't familiar with me, I'm a New York City native, born and raised, but I've been in the Atlanta, Georgia area for about half my life. So, you know, I'm considered, I guess, from Georgia now. And I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, which is now the only Black atheist organization, nationally recognized Black atheist organization in the United States. There were a few when we first started, and our intention was just to be local to the Atlanta area, but along the way that changed. And, you know, we've been making connections. We've been growing the representation for Black atheists through primarily in-person community, in-person events, and through various projects over the years. And I had actually had the opportunity to, to be on an Angry Black Rant. Ishmael interviewed me, and I know he is very much missed in the podcast world, in the in the Black atheist community as well. And so, my hearts go out to you all who are very, very close to him. And I also serve on the boards for American Atheists and the American Humanist Association. So, it has just been extremely crucial for us to have, that organizational representation within the community, within the secular community, but also with our outreach to the Black community as well, because we've made some inroads there too. And wherever we have the opportunity to amplify and uplift our voices is what I really want to do. And I know, Tiffany, we talked about you being on a cruise one year,
Hello.
we're still definitely want to do that, because we, as great as the online community is, you really, really get a good sense of what people are doing and engagement when we meet in person. And this is one of the reasons why we have been glad to facilitate the events that we do, such as the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference, such as, the cruise and the other events that we have done, because building that in-person community is extremely vital. I've just been, it's been hard work, but it's been extremely worth it. And, I've had the opportunity to meet both of you a couple of times, and which has been great. And so I really hope that once, the pandemic dies down or slows down, that we can engage in person again, soon.
Yeah, that's been one of the toughest things for me, is knowing that we can't go to Skepticon this year. That even if they have it, I just am not comfortable going anywhere at this point, and neither is Amy. But we had so much fun last year, and just getting to meet the people that online, or the people that even you've heard about but maybe haven't talked to, and hang out with them in person it's just amazing. So I highly recommend that anybody seek out conferences when they can. But yeah, it's awesome. So maybe 2021 we can meet again. I don't know. We'll see.
If we're not.
We're hosting our 10th anniversary celebration in January of 2020.
Where are you doing that at?
In New Orleans.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So mark that for your calendars.
Oh my God.
So Tiffany, tell us a bit about you and your, were you raised Christian? Did you come to atheism later? Have you always been an atheist? Kind of what's your story?
I was raised, like a lot of Black people, maybe not a lot of Black people. I don't know, but I was raised, AME in the church. I don't know if are you familiar with that branch of Christian? Go ahead.
I know about it just from watching documentaries. So.
Yeah. I wasn't formally raised religious, but I'm definitely familiar with AME, the AME church.
It's very joyful. It's very musical. There's lots of jumping and shouting. And so what gets me is a lot of people say, oh, I hated going to church. I loved going to church, but for the wrong reasons. I love the music and dancing. And there was so much music, so much dancing. And there wasn't a focus on punishment or hell in the church. Because the doctrine was, we've suffered enough. Now it's time for joy and rejoicing. And that's what the focus of the church was. And so people say, oh, did someone touch you? No one touched me. Yeah, that's what a lot of people were resentful and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like that for me at all. I just left because I found science was the answer. It just didn't make sense. I didn't leave with resentment. I just left. I left because, this book makes more sense than that book, and I still and I preferred them. I went for, I guess I never really believed because, deep down, this doesn't make sense, but the food is great and the music is really fun to listen to. It's serious. Think about it. This doesn't make sense. This Jesus guy sounds really nice and all, but it doesn't make sense. And I just sort of osmosis out of the church, like reverse osmosis out of the church. And I got my start. I've been an atheist. My parents still kind of act like it's a phase. It's been a 25-year phase.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't mind it as much. And that's what gets me. People act like you should be more angry. I'm not. I'm happier than I've ever been. Science and technology is so much more interesting. So I got my start in the community through media. And I learned through the Northern Virginia, because there was no DC chapter of American Atheists, believe it or not. There's a Northern Virginia. Yeah, there's a Northern Virginia chapter. And so they covered most of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, the Northern Virginia chapter. And then through there, I got a job or like a volunteer position for a local, what do you call it when they put the show on TV? Public access.
Public access, yeah.
Public access show called Road to Reason. And so we broadcast every week.
Oh.
Yep.
I've heard of that.
I've seen that, yeah.
And that's, I interviewed you for that.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So, and then that got me
familiar.
Yeah, and that got me backstage for a lot of events. I've been on Senate. I snuck into the Senate building and I got to meet Richard Dawkins. I snuck into CPAC a bunch of times. I got to meet a bunch of people there. And rode to the Reason rally. I've been to both of them. I got to meet a bunch of people there. And, the more I met the atheist community, the non-believing community, the secular community, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to, get speak opportunities to interview and meet so many wonderful, insightful people, and then get tired of them slowly but surely.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
Except for, and then of course meeting for the first time, really meeting more Black non-believers, because I was the only one for the longest time, even though I live in one of the blackest areas in the country. Sorry, Atlanta. but I know there's in Prince George's County is one Black county, but there's barely any non-believers around here. Barely any. And if they are, they're hiding really well.
It seems to me like it's like the church is such a big part of the Black community in general, just because of the organizing and the just the community aspect of it. And I feel like it's got to be hard to leave that and just feel kind of isolated.
Well, for me, I've always considered it to be a lauded tradition, not having been raised in the church like most Black folks, like Tiffany said, whether it was that fire and brimstone type of doctrine or whether it was more the evangelical, very musical and very, the whole, the Holy Spirit type of churches. I've always found it to be based on a serious sense of conformity, which for my upbringing, I was raised in the Black conscious community. Which carries its own set of indoctrination. But having learned early on about how religion in the church was imposed on the Black community, I found myself thinking, well, why the hell do so many of us believe in this? And like Tiffany said, DC, Atlanta, New York, all of your, it doesn't matter what major city you're in, even if they are as quote unquote progressive as they can be in any Black community, the church is still very pervasive. And it's like there's no getting around it, no matter where you are. And which does make it more challenging for Black folks who are either questioning religion or who are fully out to find each other.
Yeah.
And with my my upbringing is that there have always been dissenters of religion and critics of religion within the Black community. Always has been, but that particular, that particular legacy or that information is often obscured or if not outright left out.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do, amongst Black atheists and Black non-believers is reshape that narrative and bring it back, because people need to know whether no matter who you are. And I think, it's interesting that for a community that prides itself on education and research and critical thinking, that there is still a lot that white people still don't even know about the history and the resistance of Black folks within this country. There's always this, there's always this sense of, I didn't know. And of course, we can look to our education systems and hold them responsible for that. But, for the people who, the community holds near and dear, there's just no excuse for them to be dismissive of what further marginalized communities go through.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say this a lot. And one aspect is a lot of the civil rights movement and the early leaders were religious people. And one of the few places that Black people in our history could gather safely were churches. And a lot of people feel that if you turn away from your church, you're turning away from your history. For example, the founder of the church I grew up in was a minister.
Right. Yeah, Richard Allen.
Richard Allen was born a slave. And my university, I went to an HBCU called Morgan State University in Maryland. It started out as a Bible college for free Black people, for freed Black people. Morgan was a white guy, but we'll get over that.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
That started it for, Black folks, but, and King, Malcolm X, they were religious leaders first, and then they became civil rights leaders. People, maybe some Black folks are like, you're turning against religion, but what about the struggles?
Yes.
Religious leaders.
Right. As if, as if we can't acknowledge it, but also, critique it. There's valid criticism.
Yeah. Some guys. Oh,
No, go ahead.
Like, turn me down for dates when they found out that I'm not religious. Like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? They didn't say it like that, but oh my God, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm not sure if y'all remember the video from 2015 where, from the Atheist Alliance of America's conference in 2015, where this Black woman, their conference was going on simultaneously with the Women of Color in Ministries conference.
Oh, sexy.
I remember the video.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, for the most part, there was actually some really good engagement, but that one woman was so incensed that I was there representing, atheism as well as, my organization. And she was irate. She could not believe that as a Black woman, I had the nerve to identify as an atheist in front of these white devils. That's exactly what she said. And yes, there is such an emotional tie to the church within the Black community that it does make it hard to have that discussion. It does make it much more difficult for us to actually be able to approach this critically. And in a way that it's like, well, yes, we understand the history. We understand that, yes, the majority of our community is still very religious, but for these reasons, and that ultimately our identities should not be tied into, they don't have to be tied into, this religion. That's where much of the problem comes in, is that it is. Yeah.
No, I was saying, and you have to be careful when you approach them because it comes across as cynical. If you go, well, these people are the ones who gave us this religion. Yeah, they know this, These people already know. So you can't use that.
Yeah, or it makes it harder. It makes it much harder. But sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, and the truth hurts. We say it to these white folks too. We say it to everybody, and it's like we have, we have to own this, at some point. But hopefully we can do it in a pragmatic and tactical way. But yeah, I know some people are so tied to it that it is very, very difficult.
Do you see it changing at all? I was just going to say it's no. I know we see. No, you don't think so?
Honestly, no. That's why it was so fast for me to say that, because if you look at the protests, and if you look at the protests that are going on today, people are being super religious, and the fact that, oh my God, and it pisses me off so much. And Mandisa, I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but whenever someone gets hurt or murdered, they always bring out that family member that says, if I can forgive you.
Oh my God.
That's what God would want.
It's terrible. It is absolutely horrible.
They expect us to do that.
Yeah.
It's always us. Why do we have to? And that's a religious thing. That comes from religion. And it comes from they never expect the white people to ask their family members to forgive.
Right.
Yeah.
But black people are always asked to forgive it when a white cop or someone shoots some black dude. You know what I'm saying?
No,
it really waters down what's going on. I remember when the latest one, when that woman was convicted and the family member, the judge gave her a hug even, and the family member. But people where I live, when you're surrounded by just all white people, what you hear is, oh, see, isn't that just great? And you start getting a lot of sympathy for the cop because, oh, it must be so hard for her that this happened. And I feel like it really then ends up watering down the message of, no, this was really fucking horrible. It's not. Nobody needs to be forgiving her for what she did. She did something fucking horrible, but all of the focus turns to her and what she's going through.
It's a religious thing. It's a religious. It's rooted in this doctrine of forgiveness
and suffering
well.
Yeah.
Black. Can I get some wrath up in this? No. But yeah, it's a religious thing that we're expected to bear this cross on over Galilee or some bullshit and forgive, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe at one point there was, there's value in having something that gets you through the day or that gives you some kind of hope or that keeps you going. And I've had lots of discussions with people about whether that's a good or a bad thing. Is it good if you're using that religion to, I guess, make yourself feel better or not suffer as much?
That's what drugs are for.
Right. And the problem is when you're using it as a crutch, which so many in the black community have. It's been used to, like Tiffany said, it's been used as a way to subjugate us. As a way to try to cope with, well, this is happening to us and you're just going to have to keep dealing with it until you get to heaven when you die. And that has been one of the fundamental, when we're dealing with a system that is already economically, oppressing us and other ways being oppressive. Always turning that other cheek is like it's like you're internalizing abuse.
Yeah.
Which is not healthy for our community. It hasn't been. And it reinforces this cycle that has been taking place for years.
Yeah.
I'm out of
And
cheeks. I've ran out of cheeks.
Right. And so
I feel like it might stop you from taking, the action, even if it's violent action that you need to take.
Right. And there's been resistance, especially because once the civil rights era, people got tired. People were tired of, they were like, fuck this, it's time to fuck some shit up. But of course, what happens then? There are new laws put in place to criminalize that.
Let's look at the NRA. That's how when the Black Panthers started walking around expressing their Second Amendment rights, that's when you started getting your first assault weapons bans. Because we got tired of turning those other cheeks. And I'm not sure if the Black Panthers were secular or not, but I'm betting that they were.
For the most part, they were, yes. Yeah. And see, this is where I counter where, people give. And I will say that the church is often given an excuse for, community building as if it has the monopoly or if it's serving some sort of purpose for the Black community that we absolutely need it, right? There has been, the Black Panthers have, and Chris Cameron talked about this with his talk with his Black Freethinkers book. Yeah. And there were some of the Panthers who were explicitly atheists, and they did challenge the church. Even though they worked with some churches, they did have, they were heavily critical of the church and as an institution. And so, they were, they established they created the free breakfast program, not because they were trying to get these kids and these families to accept some form of divine solution. They did it because it was needed in the community. And,
it's an avenue. It's an avenue to get what needs to be in the community, because let's face it, the church is very efficient at gathering people and getting those things out there. I'm not going to pretend that the church has no use in that way.
Right. But what do, the thing is, what do they do it for?
Exactly.
And that's always been a problem I've had, because many of the Christians that I knew could give a damn about anyone else.
Yeah.
If as long as, as long as they were either in their circle, and then half the time you couldn't even trust that. Yeah. So I've always been very critical of that. And, most churches during the civil rights movement were safe havens, but we could also argue that the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where those 4 little girls were killed, weren't even safe there. So it's like, there are instances where even those houses of worship, we've always had to be on the defensive.
Absolutely.
So it's like, there's always this, so I, like you, Tiffany, I always say that, yes, we can acknowledge, the church and its role when it was definitely needed, but let's not pretend that it was this perfect institution for our community, not. And let's act like, well, we shouldn't critique it at all.
That's what scares me. That's what scares me today. Because that's why I think a lot of good people who don't need to be there are afraid to leave, because they have that attitude. We can't criticize it because look what they've done. But I think people are willing to step out, because we see how many people follow are in the, Black Nonbelievers, and I think it's great. I think more and more people are starting to step out.
Yes. And I honestly think that, for example, I think if Malcolm X had been alive today, because at the time of his death, he was forming the Organization for African American Unity, which was a non-religious organization. And he was one who was really trying to bring the Black community together, regardless of your belief or lack thereof.
Let's face it, he was in a cult.
Right. Oh yeah, Nation of Islam, absolutely. He was.
Yeah.
He was. And it's blasphemy if you say that too, right? It's like we can
That's
also
why
acknowledge
he died. 'Cause
Right.
he was trying to leave a cult.
Right. And there were a number, and I do think that there were, he was, that he was still on, the FBI's list. There was a lot that the NYPD really, they really failed in his, they were complicit. But yes, the Nation of Islam, was also very much complicit, in his murder. And, that's just one of the things that, we're not supposed to say that though, right? Right. We're not supposed to, we're not supposed to have these critiques within our community.
Yeah, that's my job as a white person. I come in and just critique. I'm kidding.
Right.
I'm totally kidding. That's our job. We just come in and criticize absolutely everything and tell you how to do it differently. So, we're really good at it. I don't know if you've noticed.
Well, I just want to say, thank you, Donald Trump, for making me realize that Juneteenth is a thing.
I know, right?
Happy Juneteenth, everybody. I had no idea. Nobody knew about it until him.
We could call him the education president.
Yeah. Did you know that Juneteenth was a thing?
You should all be thanking me for saving you people. For educating you people.
This is the sad thing. Like in my little white town world with, all of my friends who just lived here forever, none of us knew what Juneteenth was growing up. Nobody taught it in the schools. My mother had never heard of it until this year, until people started talking about it. I heard about it years ago just from, again, I watched lots and lots of documentaries, but it wasn't something that was celebrated here or that was even taught about. And it's weird now to see all of these people I know just going, holy shit, there was this whole holiday that nobody even bothered teaching about in school. And
Did you know there's a Black national anthem?
No, that I did not know.
There's a Black national anthem as well. We have one. It's called Lift. It's called Lift Every Voice and Sing.
And there's 3 verses as opposed to just the one. Yes. Growing up, especially like I said before, I was in the Black nationalist, the Black conscious community. So I knew what Juneteenth was. I celebrated it. I've actually performed in some, festivals in the New York area. So for me, it's interesting to see a lot of folks play catch up to a lot of information that I learned as a kid.
Yeah,
we had a Juneteenth parade here, and then they stopped doing it for a while in DC, and then they started doing it again. And, my church choir would do Lift Every Voice and Sing every year and all that stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When I was a little kid. It is a religious song. It's got lots of stuff about God in it. But my favorite rendition on YouTube, look for the one that Ray Charles did. Oh, it's wonderful.
Really? Oh,
yes.
Because I know there was one that Melba Moore spearheaded years ago. Was that the one he was in?
No, he was on Dick Cavett's show.
Okay.
Yeah, and he did it on with a little choir of 4 ladies, and it was so good because he did it with real upbeat and jazzy.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I remember in my elementary school, after they did the whole Star Spangled Banner, we would do Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Yes.
That I definitely remember.
We did that at my high school because I went with my high school was all Black. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yep. I remember doing that in elementary school. And I think that's one of the best parts about growing up in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Because, there was this sense of awareness that, that many of us, I wouldn't say that everyone caught on to it, but that we were given, that foundation as Black kids. Because some of my teachers, one of my mentors who was extremely religious, and I remember she was actually one of the catalyst for me actually, coming out fully as an atheist and starting the organization, because she actually tried to discourage me, which was disappointing. But
Wow.
yeah, she was big on Black history, big on the critical thought process, systemic racism and injustice. But when I started expressing my lack of religion, she was scared to death.
Oh my God, I had one too.
Yes.
I had one too.
It is amazing how
crazy.
Yeah.
They'll step on your dreams as soon as you step out the church.
Yes.
I want that on a t-shirt, Mandisa. Step out your dreams.
Yeah, and I think the sad part is that, for those who are unintentionally, because they think they're doing this to save us, right? They think they're doing this out of love. They think they're doing this because, it's the best thing for our people. But it just really isn't. Like,
no.
it's not. It is not. Because if you want to talk about one of the most oppressive institutions, we have to start having this conversation here.
Yeah. But let me tell you, when you grow up around, like I say, I don't understand, because I don't have the experience of growing up as a minority. Does that make sense to you, Amy?
No, that makes total sense to me. We had in my school, when I was growing up, there was not a single non-white kid in any of my schools until I probably got to junior high. And in junior high, there were exactly 2 Black kids who had been adopted by a white family. And they were the only 2 in the school.
Wow.
And yeah, I think about that a lot, and I just think because for some reason at the time, it just never occurred to me that might be hard for them. Like, and looking back on it, I think their parents would that have been?
Their parents probably did not teach them a thing about Black history and Black culture.
Probably not, no.
Yeah. I did not, when I was growing up, I went to all Black elementary school. There's probably like 3 or 4 white kids. All Black middle school, all Black high school. Then I went to a HBCU. Now
I remember. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tiffany.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying a few of my cousins and I. We went to elementary school like in the mid 80s, when busing was a huge thing. When there was a push for parents to try to get the Black kids to go to schools in more predominantly white neighborhoods in sections of Queens where I grew up. But after a while, like in 3rd grade, my mother put me and my brother in our neighborhood school, because she kind of felt like, well, there was too much of a white influence there. And she was like, no, I need to go to my neighborhood. We need to go to my neighborhood school. But yeah, for junior high school, all predominantly Black. But my high school experience was a bit more eclectic, because I went to a performing arts high school. The Fame School, the high school of performing arts that you saw on TV. Yeah, I went to the combined high school of music and performing arts. I was a vocal major. And so there was some of everyone who went there. It was in Manhattan, right behind Juilliard, right behind Lincoln Center.
Oh my God.
And it was all for, and I actually felt more at home there, because even growing up within the Black community, I still felt othered. I still, even though I really enjoyed, I don't take anything away from my experience, but there is still this, this thing about what it means to be Black, even within the Black community. And, for those who may like metal, or those who may like certain things that might not be considered of the community, it's like that can also be an isolating experience.
Oh God, yes. I never really, I was always kind of different. I liked different music. I liked this. I was always kind of different. I was, of course, not religious, but I never really felt othered until I left the country. That it was the first time I really felt like a minority, because I was always around Black people. And even then, the only time I really got bothered by the cops, and now we're turning this around to police brutality, was when I would go downtown DC, right, and go to the rich parts. Like, I almost got arrested because I thought I was a prostitute.
Oh my God.
So I was in my goth phase, which you kind of never lose. And I was at a club and I was leaving and I had lost my car. And so I was walking around on the street in this tight black vinyl dress, right? And all my dark makeup. You know, I had at the time I had dreadlocks and they were all hanging down, you know, heavy eye makeup and these really tall boots. And I'm walking around looking for my car, right? Rifling through my purse. And these two police officers stopped me, right? And it's like, hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's all this? And without even asking, he took my purse.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And this was probably, oh my God, 2003.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And he's like, well, I'm working hard tonight. And I'm like, I just left the club. Like, which one? And then I realized, oh, there's a lot of strip clubs around here. Because this is 14th Street Northwest. I don't know if you're familiar with DC. But yeah, there's a lot of like.
Not at all.
Oh, there's. In this area, it's where a lot of like, because it's not too far away from. And it's like upper northwest, where and a few more blocks up, and you got Embassy Row. Okay, you know, it's where like richer folks would go for their sleeves.
Yeah,
and so and it took me a while because I'm young and dumb, and it took me a while. I'm like, oh, they think you're a prostitute. God. And so I had to lead them back to the club I was, and they were like, the bouncers knew who I was. They're like, no, she's been here, she's a regular. And then they saw how everyone else was dressed and like, oh, and so one of the bouncers walked me, like, helped me find my car. And then it took me a while to hit me, like, they thought all these other girls walking around dressed like this, they stopped you.
Yeah.
You know? Oh.
I think
I started crying.
Oh, God.
Totally messed up my makeup. But yeah.
I think that's where so much of the, you know, I don't even know.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that subject change, but
no, well, it's very relevant.
Yeah, I think a lot of our issues are, you know, in a town where I grew up, very rural, very white. My only interactions with the police ever have been at school, like when they were doing something in the auditorium about policemen and what they do, or getting pulled over twice. I've been pulled over twice in my life. Both were for speeding, and I did the very typical started crying and they left me alone thing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, works if you
works.
It totally works. You just start crying and they feel awkward, and then they are like, ugh. Like, I was telling someone the other day, even not many years ago, I got into a car accident, and I had both of my children were in the car, and a friend's child, and my dog. We were all in this car, and I turned to look at my son who was in the front seat, and I missed a light turning red, and another car just T-boned us. And this accident was 100% my fault. I'm the one that didn't see the thing change, and it was. Thank God nobody, well, not thank God, but you know what I mean. Thank the God I don't believe in, that nobody got seriously injured. But even then, the police, it wasn't even a police, I'm sure it was a highway patrolman. I don't know. It was somebody who I remember going to high school with. I think it was a guy that was probably a year ahead of me. But he was so kind to me while he was ticketing me. Like, he's writing out the ticket, and he was saying, you know, I know this is just because I obviously was shaking and freaking out, and I was worried about my kids and everything. You know, it was this. I had another woman come out of her car and start screaming at me immediately, which was like not helpful at all. Thank you.
Right.
But yeah, the cop just couldn't have been kinder about it, and he was like, I have to give you this ticket. It's for distracted driving. But you know what? It's going to be okay. It'll come off your record in a few years. And what you're going to do is you go to the sheriff's office. Here's where it is. Like, they'll be very nice. But you just bring, like, the whole thing was him making sure I felt okay about the fact that he was giving me a ticket for distracted driving. And I look back on that now and I think how kind of fucked up that is. Like, that's typical in this kind of town. That's how everybody I know grows up seeing the police, that they're there to help the community. And so you have so many white people that can't even wrap their brains around, wait, what? The police are hurting people? I don't understand.
Right. Ideally, that's the way it should be.
Ideally, everybody should be treated that way.
Right.
You know, if I started crying in a car accident, he'd probably give me a drug test.
Yeah, probably.
You know, like, what's wrong with this bitch?
Yeah, Amy and I have talked about before. We've both done that. We've started crying when we've gotten and to be fair, I didn't immediately turn on tears. Like, I was actually crying. I was that upset.
Oh, you mean to tell me you didn't do an Amy Cooper?
No, I did not. I did not do one of those. Oh my God, that bitch. I don't even. Yeah. That was so fucked up.
That ain't never. I'm scared. I grew up scared of the police.
Yeah.
I grew up scared of the police. I've never gone to one. Police has been the last resort. Around here, the police is the last people you call.
Yeah. They've always been like and you know, I grew up in the projects in New York. And so, of course, you know, there's always been police activity. You know, there's always been, it's almost like a war zone. And yes, you know, you do grow up with a mistrust for law enforcement. Now, have I known, I mean, in most of your major cities, there are a certain number of, you know, black cops and enforcement of color, but then sometimes it seems like they're just reinforcing the system too.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, whereas you think you might, you know, get some sort of refuge, don't count on it.
No.
Especially if you're a woman.
Yeah. They ain't gonna believe you. And like I said, I'm not hello?
Yep.
Okay.
We're here.
I'm not from we grew out, you know, started early years in DC, but then we moved out to the suburbs when I was like 6. So suburbs outside of DC, really quiet, not, you know, in the crack era, it got hit hard, in DC, right? And even in the suburbs, you still don't trust the police. You know, you get pulled over. Back in those days, keep your hands up, don't say nothing. You know, I saw my father, grown man, get called boy by the police, you know, when I was a kid. And I'm like, you know who my father is? You know? Yeah. But it's like, don't say nothing, don't look at him, just sit. You know?
Well, something I've actually been thinking about Mandisa a lot, just because I've been thinking a lot about having kids, and you know, we both have sons, and they're roughly the same age.
I don't have any kids.
Yeah,
stop bragging.
Good choice.
I'm just gonna sit here.
I don't advocate. We on Secular Soup do not advocate having children. Trust me, that's our main thing. But I think a lot about, you know, how differently, Mandisa, you have to talk to your kids about what would happen if they got pulled over, or how they should have to act. And for me, it was something that never even would have occurred to me until the past few years. Like, it never even would have occurred to me to talk to my kids about how they should act if they encounter police.
You know, when I was growing up, and I'm sorry, Amy, there was this pamphlet that was produced called The Little Black Book. And it was a guide for young black males in particular, because it's good for women as well. It's good for black girls too. But It was a pamphlet to help guide young Black boys if they were ever stopped by the police and how they should handle themselves. And it wasn't that you just, you complied and said, yes, sir, all the time. It was about knowing your rights. Mm-hmm. It was about knowing how to handle yourself and using that right to remain silent.
I'd be afraid of that.
And, knowing how to basically beat them at their own game. Mm-hmm. And, I remember that book. I remember that pamphlet. And it was basically like it was a tool for survival. Because at that time, there were so many people getting killed by the cops mm-hmm. that you needed to know. You needed to know what your rights were because, they're counting on you being ignorant. Of the laws, because if you're in an economically disadvantaged community, then they're counting on you to not be educated and knowing what those rights are. And so it was really about, and so when I think about my sons, mm-hmm. Because there were, like Tiffany said, the cops didn't necessarily care who you were, and mm-hmm. this is why, getting into the, the subject of respectability politics. And I saw an article.
Yes, I hate that.
Yeah, they were saying that, we could change the narrative by wearing suits. Are you kidding?
That's the same logic as women get raped mm-hmm. because they wear short skirts. That's the same logic.
Right. Mm-hmm. I'm like, first of all, do you know how many people were killed in their, what is considered Sunday best, or what is, or how were stopped? And, first of all, let's go back to the period of the, where the mob was real active and how many gangsters wore suits. I mean, mm-hmm. that was their, so using that as, the bar for changing the narrative is absolutely ridiculous. And, there were people, especially Black folks, they didn't care who you were. No. Especially if you were dressed nice or you had a nice vehicle, you were perceived, you were assumed to have stolen it.
Yeah.
And so really it's about knowing how to when I talk, because now we live in a very, very nice neighborhood. It's predominantly Black down here in the Fayetteville area, about 30 minutes outside of Atlanta.
Fancy.
But, it's really, really nice. If you have an opportunity, I did some live sessions in my neighborhood. But and they're public on Facebook. But the thing is that even if they don't necessarily have to face what we did growing up now, they still need to be aware if they're anywhere outside of, if they aren't near us, they need to know what their rights are. They need to know how to handle themselves and to be able to say, hey, and then also live another day.
Even though, learning that shit would still scare me. Mm-hmm. Even they say like, I know my rights and I don't have to tell you nothing. Yeah, well, he'd still, headbutt mm-hmm. me with the, with his gun or something. I'm scared. Mm-hmm. I'm still scared. I wouldn't know what to do. I don't know.
And see, given how, I was just going to say, given how fucking jumpy the cops seem to be, it would just scare them more somehow anyway. And I would worry that, you're like in an impossible position. There's no right thing to do because these cops are just looking for a reason to do something. And And
so the thing is that, because I was raised with that sense of awareness, I want I'm raising my kids with that sense of awareness as well. Yeah. That, and unfortunately, the cops aren't the ones de-escalating the situations like they should be. Mm-hmm. They aren't de-escalating it. If anything, they're making it worse.
Oh, they're definitely making it worse. Yeah.
And so, they would need to be prepared, to encounter that cop that's looking to make it worse instead of diffusing and de-escalating like they're supposed to. It's a reality check every single day.
Can I make a statement to white folks out there?
Please do. Be brutally honest.
don't be afraid to ask questions and don't be afraid to talk about it. A lot of people go, well, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. Stop that. Stop it. Stop it. That makes it worse. See color. Please see color. Because if you don't see color, it's not going to help anything. I was going to say heal, but that's dumb. Okay, because we're never going to heal. All right.
Well, and the color blindness is a huge
issue.
It's a way to hide racism.
It's a way to just smear over the issue without helping anything. Because one thing I noticed, because I talked to a conservative, and when you do color blindness, I only see the because when you ignore the real issues, then it's like, well, if we're all the same and systemic racism don't exist no more, then these disadvantages must be because of their character.
Yep.
Absolutely. It must be the contents of their character. And since Martin Luther King is the only Black person I've ever heard of, he's like Superman, then this is all the Black history I know. Please look and stop treating it like everything that has to do with Black folks is a separate thing.
Oh,
from America. That's why I kind of don't like the term African American.
Yeah, I've been reading that lately, that it's not...
Why is your citizenship automatically granted to you?
Well, it's something that they teach, like my kids, again, living in the same town, almost completely white. Growing up, everything they learn about Black history is, number one, they're told nonstop to use the term African American. That's all. Like my kids were afraid. They're still almost afraid to use the word Black because they've been it was drilled into them at school so much that the correct term was African American. And I feel like it was probably teachers meaning well, but none of them knew any Black people to even ask. So.
Right. It makes me feel like an immigrant. Yeah. I'm not an immigrant. I'm from here.
Yeah.
Right. I do think, I can understand, people trying to be more politically correct and trying to be more inclusive in the terms. And I see advantages in using them interchangeably, but also Black folks in this country are also Caribbean. They're also Caribbean descent. They're also from direct African descent. So I always say, do use the term Black. I mean, granted, it did stem from the racist construct, in this country, but for the purposes of defining us as a people, I don't see anything wrong with it. First of all, there's nothing
either
wrong
way.
with color Black. There is nothing wrong with being Black either.
Yep.
So, I'm bliggity Black. So it's like, what? And there's nothing to be ashamed of, about it.
You know what? You know what got me thinking about it is leaving the country. Because when I left the country, and I lived outside the country for a number of years. I was in Asia, and people looked at me. They heard me. So it's like, Canadian? No, American. Yeah, they didn't go African American. Like, no, they just went American. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, wow, they just see me as an American. Yeah. You know what I mean? They didn't have to hyphenate it or call me anything else. They're just like,
nobody walks around calling me a French Canadian American. Like,
I'm like, wow,
it's irrelevant.
It felt great.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What was interesting is that we are raised to be so defensive in this country, rightfully so. Yeah. But as I got older, I had to learn how to relax some of those defenses because it is absolutely important for us to understand what our ancestors and what people have been through, but that we don't have to carry it with us all the time. That it is okay that when we are in different, like when we travel or when we go to different areas, that we aren't always going to be we may be pleasantly surprised
Yeah.
at the experiences that we have. And I think, it's good for us. And that's why it is good to travel and to go different places and to see different people. And I remember, when I encountered other Black folks who didn't have the experience of, because there are some Black folks who've never had the experience of, being brutalized by the police or, and I have to respect that.
Wait till you meet Nigerians in another country. Oh my God.
I've been to Ghana as a teenager. I went to Ghana. Yeah. Only stopped through Nigeria in the airport. Yeah. But that was a very interesting experience as well. They knew we were American. They absolutely knew. But it's and of course our views of the continent of Africa, are always negative in nature, for the most part. But for me, I grew up with a very positive view of it. But yes, it is, it is good to, travel somewhere else and leave the country and see how things are in different areas.
Let me tell you,
changes your life.
You will be, especially if you go to East Asia, you'll be just another dumb American. Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter was actually in Shanghai teaching English before the pandemic got really bad. So she got out of there just in time before the travel bans really went into effect.
Oh, they're super racist in China. I didn't go to China, but I've heard they don't like Black people in China.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, she said she saw a number of Black folks there, but that they definitely she said they were taking pictures of her, because it was like they never seen Black folks before. She said, they do that type of stuff over there. And I can only imagine that in certain parts of China. Some people love it. Some people hate it. It's very interesting.
No, it doesn't feel good. Well, it's a little better in Japan, slightly worse in Korea. Yeah.
That is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been out of the country once in my life, and it was when I was 21. I was 20 at the time, and I went to England and Ireland, and it was through a college writing class, and it's a long story, but we ended up going to England, Ireland, and Scotland, and then a friend of mine, we bought extra tickets to be able to go over to Paris for one day, so we took the Channel and went over to Paris, but it was the first time in my whole life where I felt so it's
liberating.
Well, it wasn't even that. To me, it was just the culture shock. I had never experienced culture shock before. And
isn't it great?
Just standing around going, I can't process anything. Nobody speaks my language. I can't communicate to people in the way I want to. Everybody's staring at me. It was just the weirdest. That's the first time I ever understood. I
felt that
maybe
way
in some places I'm the weird one. It was very.
I felt that way the first time I went to the Midwest.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine. Yeah. I've lived here my whole life. I can imagine. There was somebody in my town who, a couple of years ago, somebody sent a grant to try to refurbish this old hotel we have in town. And it was someone from Minneapolis who wanted to open a home, I guess, I don't want to say boot camp, but some sort of home for Black youths, for men, for Black boys, I guess. And it was religious. And he was like, I'm going to bring these kids up here, and it's going to be like boot camp, and we're going to teach them about Jesus. And all I could think was so what you want to do is bring a bunch of kids to a town full of white people that are already racist and hate and subject these kids not only to your boot camp bullshit, but subject them to everybody in this I thought that's the worst thing I've ever heard. Oh God, no, he didn't get the permit. So no. And I'm sure a part of that was, he would have had to get a permit from like the city council. And honestly, although none of them would ever say it out loud, maybe it was like, do we want that element in town?
First. Nobody does that for us. It's like, I want to open an urban art center for poor mountain white boys who want to experience, culture and life of urban art centers, in the middle of a Black classic neighborhood. We just can't get the permits.
This is if you ever want to be in the town that's just exactly what you imagine all white people are, it's this town. Like it's I can't even, I've had so many frustrating conversations with people who they truly do not understand what you mean when you say systemic racism to. They can't even, they're like, but what? But I'm not racist. What are you talking about?
We elected Obama. That means that racism
exactly.
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah. I voted for Obama. I'm colorblind. I judge people by how they act. I don't judge anybody. And you'll hear a lot of, I swear to God, I've heard this from people. I'm not racist, but and they'll launch into some totally racist thing, and you're just like, they legitimately think in their head that they're not racist. They believe that.
And
it's,
but that's the thing. But then when you get into a serious conversation, they're afraid to go further because they think of us as a monolith. Mandisa lives in the South. I live in the Mid-Atlantic. She was born in New York. We're completely different people with different cultures, but we do share an overarching Black culture that has a lot of similarities because we're all connected. Maybe we are a monolith. I have no idea.
No.
I doubt it. But
you should.
A lot of.
Go ahead.
There's so many of us. There's there's the West Coast Black folks. There's the Southern Black folks. There's the Midwestern Black folks. There's different types of us, but. There's a lot that we share, and there's a lot that, because of the overarching systemic racism, there's a lot that we all go through that's the same bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's just it gets endlessly frustrating because it's like I can't figure out what to say to my peers to get them to understand how much they don't understand. Like there's some people that you're just never going to change and they're always going to be horrible. But there's so many people I know who are like, no, you could get it if you just maybe a little smarter, or if you put in the time and effort and maybe thought some more about this. And
I think a lot of people are scared to ask because they're scared to offend. Don't worry. It's more offensive if you don't ask and then make that wrong assumption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And if you actually aren't listening, it's like, don't ask the question because you just want to ask it. Mm-hmm. Ask the question because you truly are concerned and you really, really want to do something about it. Because I remember growing up, even, in my conscious cultural upbringing, I saw a lot of white folks that were involved. Mm-hmm. There were actually a lot of folks who, who were serious about it. And so it isn't impossible to do, if you really, really.
Well, yeah, I'm surrounded by this great group of people in town that, I was actually talking to my sister-in-law today who lives in St. Paul, and she's like, I don't know how you keep living there. Like, it's just awful. I said, I actually have this group of friends who are amazing, and there's like this core kind of activist group in town. There's like 8 of us, and we just do everything. So like if there needs to be a rally for anything that's remotely liberal, we're always the ones that just end up doing it because we have all this energy, but we don't live in a big town. And like, those are the people that I surround myself with, that I love, that want to have these conversations and are trying to make things better. And then but then like 95% of the people are I'm colorblind and there's no racism anymore, idiots. And
then why do some people be trying to get so angry when they hear like Black Lives Matter? Then they approach it with anger and they act like it's some kind of
like it's an
organization
to them.
Yeah, it's like an insult to them. They act like it's an organization that's out to get them.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, they think it's like a terrorist organization.
Yeah. No,
but they're totally not racist. It has nothing to do with race. It's just that they think Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization.
Well, like, maybe if Black people didn't do so many crimes, and I'm like, oh my God, what?
Oh yeah. Even atheists. I've had so many conversations with atheists that are just. I remember asking someone once, like I was trying to discuss. The prison system and the just sheer numbers of people in prison. And I was like, what do you think is most likely? That Black people are just fundamentally worse people somehow and commit more crimes, or that there is a systemic problem that we need to fix that's causing way too many people, ratio-wise to be in prison? And he actually said to me, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen any data on it, so I guess I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that. I mean,
wow.
I'm not, and it's just like, this is like a critical thinking skeptic atheist, but like I don't.
It's amazing how how all of the evidence and critical thinking and research goes out the window when it stops being about the God concept.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, he probably read that bell curve thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's a big Sam Harris fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've tried. I remember actually just getting into a loud argument once, and we're friends. Like it's a whole thing. He's nice. We try to remain friends, but we have very loud arguments. But I was telling him, like, why don't Sam Harris, if he is truly not racist and truly just wants to understand things in a way where he is being the best critical thinker, why doesn't he have more Black guests on his show? Why doesn't he have more women on his show? But my friend is like, why? Why would that matter? And I said, because you.
I'm sorry.
I'm like, you don't, unless you're listening to all kinds of different voices, you're not hearing the whole story. Like, you can't. If you're listening to this one white guy every single week talk about things, you're hearing one story. If you don't hear anybody else's view or story or background, then you're just not getting a well-rounded idea. But his thing is, but if we want to be equal, then why are we judging everybody by if they're, Black or if they're a woman, or because then you're just separating them and putting everybody into camp again. And
gosh, yeah.
And you go around in these circles where it's like, but no, I think we should all truly be equal. But if we're going to be truly equal, then we can't be, just putting each other in these categories.
Oh, gosh, yeah. It's going to be equal by talking about diversity with all white people.
Yeah.
Totally.
He's an incel, man. That's all it is.
I mean,
it's a 60-year-old incel.
Like, then you get the whole, it's not about race, it's about class. Like, I guarantee that any poor person in town would get treated the same way. It's just like,
this is how young folk, these white kids are trying to hijack the protests that are going on now and changing it from a race issue to a class issue, because that's more comfortable and easy to talk about to them.
Yep.
Right.
Because they grew up colorblind,
Well, yeah, that's the whole. I just wrote a fucking long diatribe on my Facebook page, but it was basically just, I'm so tired of listening to so many people like pick apart every single situation that happens, every murder by the police, and sit and pull it apart and go, but see, it's not racist because this happened, or they'll find all these little things to make sure that it's not racist. And it's like, why are we spending time doing that and making sure that it's not? Why are you so
because they're
concerned
to talk about race?
Yeah, they don't want to. They think that they are a racist if that incident involved race. Like, it's just,
Right. And it's also a lack of accountability as well. You know, there are a lot of white people who feel like, well, that black folks and other people of color are pointing the finger directly at them.
Oh, sweetie.
Absolutely.
And it's like, you know what? Hey, your collective, your ancestors have a lot to answer for. And so you have to understand that. But, you know, trying to, you know, it's like, look, you know, we're not sitting up here pointing the finger and saying you did it unless you actually did it. But you absolutely have to, I mean, because white supremacy has hurt everybody. It really has.
Even you.
And we inherited this world we were given.
It has affected you as well negatively. And so we're gonna have to deal with this shit together.
And in order to do that, you're gonna have to accept that this is happening on this level.
Right. There are gonna be some things that you don't want to hear. There are gonna be some things that you don't want to hear about what white people have done. You know, and it's like, you know, we can bring up certain areas of history where certain groups of people were persecuted because of their heritage. But when we're talking about the systemic factors and how that has been used to perpetuate actions against a group of people like the black community, you know, there's and I don't like to do the oppression Olympics, but there needs to be an understanding of the differences.
I like the oppression Olympics.
Hey, I'm fine with the oppression Olympics.
My favorite sport is I'm just kidding.
No, you fundamentally had it worse than we did, trust me. I try to tell people, like, no, maybe we didn't personally own slaves. But we inherited this community from our ancestors. Like, we were raised in this, and
there's some accountability there.
Exactly.
There is. And
we need to do something. We need to fix it because we are the ones who perpetuate the problem. So, but nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear that they're not racist because they've never said the N-word or they've never directly said anything mean to a black person, so they're totally not racist, right? Like, it's just
this isn't elementary school.
This is what people actually think.
Right. It's not about you said something mean.
Yeah. No, people just don't want to think any deeper into it than, well, I personally try to be nice to everybody, so problem solved. Anyway, well, it's been an hour and a half, and I don't know how long you wanted to talk for, but this has been an amazing conversation, and I want you both.
I've drank.
How much did you have to drink?
A lot of tea. So,
okay. I get it. Yeah, when Amy and I are recording, we have to just leave it paused and go take bathroom breaks, and we'll come back. Anyway, insider podcasting for you. I would love to have both of you come back, just even separately, with both Amy and I. She's the one that does all the really mean, snarky, backhanded comments, so she's fun to be around. But is there anything you want to promote or plug or talk about, I guess, before we wrap up?
I'll let Mandisa go first.
Okay.
She's got purpose.
Yeah.
So yes, I absolutely do encourage people to visit the website for Black Nonbelievers. Do support our work. We are a 501c3 organization. Donations to us are tax deductible. I'm trying to get us to the point where, they can be paid positions because, I took on full-time activism 2 years ago in 2018. And so the purpose was to continue to grow the organization because it was needed. And so the representation, the work we do, it is extremely important. We appreciate the spike in support, especially recently. There's different ways to, you can donate directly through our website. You can support us through purchases through Amazon Smile. You can Cash App us now. And we do have an online store. We have some great swag. We have some great merchandise. We have a great slogan, walking by sight, not faith. And so, we just have, we've been branding, promoting not just the organization, but the people in it. Yeah. And so, we definitely, if you have time, and we encourage, I think, Amy, you have at least a mug or something from us.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have several can cozies that my child still uses every day. He walks around with his black non-believer can cozies. And a shot glass, which my children drink milk out of because they think it's funny. So they'll take shots of like milk or juice.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and so this is what, definitely, I know Tiffany is a part of our Facebook group. It's not as dramatic as some other online spaces. Because
she means annoying.
On the internet?
Right.
She means annoying.
Right. Yeah. Because I manage the shit out of it because people are still healing. People are coming out of their religious beliefs. They're also coming out of that isolation. And so it's about community building and not just arguing and debating all day long. So in that process, we've had to manage that very carefully. And so, we are, wherever social media is, we're on Instagram, Be Nonbelievers Inc., Twitter at Be Nonbelievers, the B and the N are capitalized, and wherever you can find us on the World Wide Web.
I'll have it all in the show notes. So
awesome.
if you listener are listening to this, look at your phone, swipe up, and you'll see show notes, and everything will be in there. So I'll do that. And just speaking to my fellow white people listeners out there, one thing you can do if you're fretting about what do I want to help, what do I do, is spend your money.
Yes, spend your privilege.
Give your money to Black non-believers and to Black-owned businesses, and take that money that you have and use it for something good. It's an easy, I won't say easy, we're not all rich, but like it's a simple thing you can do that doesn't hurt, that will help tremendously. So I'll put it in the show notes, and just if you were gonna give some money to American Atheists, give it to Black non-believers instead. That's all I'm saying. So
and shout outs to Debbie Goddard, who is the VP of programs there.
Is she?
And
I've met her.
She's now
she's
she used to work for the Center for Inquiry, but she's now the VP of programs at American Atheists. And so if you're supporting American Atheists, how about you take some of that money and donate to the Black believers too? You can do both.
Give it to both. It's fine. Yes. You can do both.
Yeah.
Yes.
We prefer BN, but hey, do both.
Years ago, I met Debbie at a conference, and I talked to her a little bit because I'm like, I'm in this small town and I have a rural atheist group, but we want to try to be more diverse and be more open, and like, what can we do? And she sat and had very good suggestions and talked me through it, and she's amazing. So I didn't know she was an American Atheist now. Still give more of your money to Mandisa, though. Don't tell anyone I said that. So Tiffany, how about you?
I am a comedian, a stand-up of some variety. And
can we see you in videos or anything anywhere? Do you have content out there?
Well, my theater is called, I belong to a theater called the Laugh Index Theater in Washington, D.C., litcomedy.com. Right now we're doing our Lit Fest. We are suffering because of the coronavirus, so our shows are now virtual. And right now we are doing our Lit Fest, and you can check us out at litcomedy.com/shows.
Okay.
So our YouTube channel is just go to YouTube and search. I think it's
Google it. I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, Google it. It's fine. They post our videos about a week after they come out, and I've just performed last week. I'm not sure when we're going to have another virtual show after the festival, but we usually, if we weren't going through the apocalypse, we would have every week in Adams Morgan. I hope we can start up again very soon when restrictions are lifted. But yes, we do weekly shows online now. But yes, you can see us.
And I literally just Googled it and found it immediately. So it will also be in the show notes. So
yes.
Go look for that.
Yeah, and you can follow me on Twitter at Auntie Skeleton.
Okay. I should write that down before I forget to.
Please check me out. And I do open mics. And if I have one, again, comedians are suffering now because we can't perform.
Yeah.
So we are moving everything online. And if I am on an online show, I will post it to my Twitter. Please come check me out.
Fantastic.
Support your local comedian. Oh, I don't have a Patreon.
I agree.
Yes, and I have a Patreon as well. I mean, I do have a Patreon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll put a link to yours, because yours you have to go directly to it, right? It won't
because
search up in Patreon. Yeah.
Yeah, I put some adult content in there, so it isn't searchable.
Shame on you.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I throw in curse words in there every single day. Yes.
Okay, so I'm making notes, because I always forget to make accurate show notes because I'm a bad podcaster. So there we go. Thank you so much both for giving me your time. We really appreciate it. And this is going to be our next episode, and it's going to be fantastic. Thank you so much. I will talk to you both again, and we'll get set up with both the other Amy and I, and it'll be a great time. So everybody listening, go support them, check the show notes, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks to all of you motherfuckers who put up with the Amy's droning on week after week. If you enjoy their delightful bitchcraft, please follow them on all of the social medias and send them all of your money on Patreon or PayPal. You can find them on these platforms by using the Google machine. It's not hard. If you want to bitch with other fans about the show, join the Secret Soup Talk Facebook group. If you want to tell Amy and Amy to fuck off personally, you can send an email to secularsouppodcast@gmail.com, although it may go unanswered. Please rate and review the show on iTunes, Facebook, and wherever else you can review things like this. It will help spread the soup gospel far and wide. And hey, text someone right now. Tell your friends. As always, we'll leave you with the vocal stylings of Mr. Eli Bosnick.
Secular soup creed. Soup is the ultimate virtue. It's delicious, nutritious, patriarchy smashing, racism fighting, warm and fuzzy, human affirming, fun having, anti-theist, glitter throwing, tummy satisfying, pair of new shoes fulfilling, diversity seeking, happiness. Minestrone, beef and barley, chicken broth and split pea, gazpacho, tomato, clam chowder and potato, chicken noodle, beef noodle, egg drop and ramen cup, miso, gumbo, leek and pho. Grab a bowl and taste the magic. Slurp even this.